The TVs were suspended from the ceiling by iron cages, their brown, untidy welded rods contrasting with the smooth ash black of the TV sets. One was directly behind the driver's seat, the other was in the middle of the bus. Jabril gulped down the details in a hurry as if the TVs would come alive at any moment, at which point he would be forced to look away or shut his eyes. The feverish man whom Emeka had scolded suddenly began to cry, and Jabril's attention came back to his immediate surroundings. The man was now slung across the seat, pulling his blanket ever tighter, which reminded Jabril of some of the bodies he had seen as he fled Comfy. The people around the man were trying to do something about his sickness, and Emeka took out 3 doses of fansidar from his pocket. "This should take care of your malaria," he said as he handed the drugs to the man. "We don't need a dead man in here." "3 doses?" said Madame Anyema, an old woman. "Usually it's 1 dose of 3 tablets. You will kill him with 9 tablets." She wore a green lace blouse and a beautiful wrapper. She had no head tie, and her wrinkled face was framed by bushy white hair and a pair of glasses. She sat in the same row as Emeka, but stared out the window. "By the grace of God, nothing will happen to him," Emeka said. "It's overdose," she argued. "Maybe you are not a believer, then," he said. "That's beside the point here. You must belong to one of those old dead churches." Emeka had more supporters, including the patient himself. They all argued that the sick man needed a bit of an overdose to balance his severe fever. Madame Anyema brought out a little bottle of water from her handbag and helped the man take the drugs. She stayed close to him. Jabril was impressed by this kindness and looked favorably on the lady. He did not stare at her or laugh secretly at her uncovered hair. Her matronly carriage reminded him of his mother, though the latter was not that old. Actually, he had not noticed her all this while and had probably left Madame Anyema out of his census. He was a bit taken aback by his reaction to this woman. Before now, he had never thought he could feel that way toward any woman but his mother. As long as they were women, he just put them in the one category in his mind. It was easier that way. Yet he could not see what was so special about Madame Anyema. It was not his first time meeting an old woman or seeing a woman being charitable. "I'm not sure this man can take it," Emeka said, bringing Jabril's mind back to the sick person. The man was shaking hard, and when he attempted to speak his voice shook too. Yet, as malarial patients are wont to do, he was sweating profusely. Madame Anyema held him like a child. "He no go die," Tega said. "Satan na liar, na you be liar," Ijeoma said to her, her large eyes seeming to cover her whole face. "Go wash your stupid hair, Jo-O." "By the grace of God, your head no correct," Tega told her, "because I no allow you steal my space." By the special grace of God, no your head no collect," she retorted. "Maybe we gave him too much fansidar," Madame Anyema said. "He needed a big jolt," Emeka said. "It was too much," Madame Anyema insisted, pulling her patient closer, "and we did not even know whether he had eaten anything. Once it is well with the soul, it's well with the body." Having said that, Emeka removed his monkey coat and, with Madame Anyema, struggled to rid the man of his blanket, which they thought was the cause of the sweating. But he held on. Finally, Emeka took it away from him and suggested that people give him a space in the aisle. Other sympathizers pushed and argued until some in the aisle volunteered to share their space with the sick man. Emeka spread the blanket on the floor and laid him down on his back, with many passengers pressing against him and stepping over him. The space was so tight that they arranged his hand on his chest as if he were in a coffin too narrow for his body. The people agreed that an old man from the aisle should take the sick person's seat until he was strong enough to sit up. The chief gave Jabril a bad look as if to say, "If you had behaved well, you would have been the one to benefit from that seat." Jabril had watched the drama from a distance with a mixture of pity and jealousy and then repulsion. When the sick man had struggled with Emeka for the blanket, Jabril felt like helping Emeka, but he did not know what to do. How could he have helped with one hand? How could he have dared to speak with his Hausa accent? He had prayed for the man silently and wished that Allah would keep death far from him, at least until he got to his destination. Jabril began to feel a strange affinity for the sick man. The malaria had twisted his tongue, making him babble, and Jabril had to speak as little as possible and feign an accent for the sake of his disguise. He watched the people watching the man, and on their sympathetic faces he could see that the man might not make it home alive. The spike in his fever had put a chill on the struggle for space in the bus, and the refugees now spoke in hushed voices. Jabril really admired how Emeka had rallied to help the sick man and talk people out of their spaces for him. Yet, Seeing how one man got the sympathy of the whole bus, Jabril began to feel jealous. What could he do to endear himself to these people? How could he get everybody to arrange for a place for him to sit or ask the chief to give him back his seat without giving himself away? And then he could not bear to look at the sick man on the floor. He reminded him of so many corpses he had seen on the way here. In his mind, Jabril tried to distinguish the dead from those who were in the process of dying, like this man. He could not. He kept looking at the ceiling of the bus. Now his revulsion for the sick man was so strong that he preferred to look at the TV sets. They were not as frightening as before, but when he looked at them his sensibilities were not as unguarded as when he looked at the women. He paid attention to the knobs and the rings around the knobs. He wished the darkness of the TV screens would descend on his recent memories, and he wished those memories, which kept pressing to be recognized, were fastened and caged like the TVs. Well, if you die, Tiga said, pointing at the sick man, we must decide quick what we go do with the corpse. Chebby? You want steal the corpse or the dead man's face too? Ijeoma said. We must take the corpse home, Emeka said. No, I think we must give his space to another person, Tiga said. It's our tradition to be laid to rest in our ancestral land, Emeka said. No need to carry dead body home when so many days stranded, Tiga insisted. But he has paid his fare, Madam Aniema said. And the luxurious bus insurance covers his burial, you know, Emeka said. Hugo claimed the body of Seth de Wahala time. Now a major crisis we're there now. I'm sure you'd be Muslim, Ijeoma said. That's why you want bully, quick. The bus was silent. The word Muslim formed in many mouths, but nobody had the will to say it out loud. Instead they turned and looked at Tiga carefully, and then examined their neighbors. It was as if a sacrilege word had been uttered in the Holy of Holies. Jabril looked down and bit his lip. He felt that all eyes were on him, but kept telling himself that they were not talking about him. In his ears, the silence was like an eternity. He closed his eyes and waited for blows to land on him. You won't incite them to kill me, Abi? Tiga said, finally finding her voice. She was breathing hard and pulling at her cornrows as if she intended to tear out the braids. Her eyes met the dangerous stares in the bus with credulity. She is not a Muslim, Emeka announced, and the whole bus was behind him, scolding Ijeoma for calling Tiga a Muslim. They told her a fight over storage space was too small a matter to elicit such a bad will toward a fellow Christian. They berated her for ingratitude to God, for she was seated, when others would have to stand for hundreds of miles during the journey home. The cacophony seemed unending, with some insisting that Ijeoma must apologize to Tiga and to the whole bus. My people, Chief Ukongo said, standing up and thudding his stick repeatedly to calm the situation. When everybody was quiet, the old man cleared his throat. This matter is getting out of hand. Let no one say Muslim or Islam again on the bus. We have suffered too much already at the hands of Muslims. If one man dies, we shall take him home. Period. Yes, good talk, one man encouraged. Chief, you go live forever, another said. Make nobody mention anything way be against God's children. Yes, let's watch what we say on this bus, Madam Aniema said. As the conversation reverted to the bus's insurance policy, Jabril began to breathe again. He did not know how he had managed to remain on his feet at the mention of the word Muslim, or when people had searched the faces of their neighbors. Though he had looked down immediately, he had expected someone to grab him and tell him he was a fraud. He expected someone to pull his arm out of his pocket. It was as if his mind had stopped, for he did not hear Tiga protesting her innocence, or the chief diffusing the people's anger toward Ijeoma. The point at which he started hearing again was when someone said, Yes, good talk. Now Jabril wiped the bag between his knees and used his left hand to wipe the sweat that trickled down his forehead. It was not enough, so he pulled a shirt from his bag and mopped his face and neck, and tried to pay attention to the conversation around him. When he returned the shirt to his bag, he felt the piece of paper that bore the name of his father's village. It was like an energy boost. He thought of taking it out and looking at it, but decided against that. He wriggled his toes in the canvas shoes to be sure they were not numb, and shifted his weight from one leg to the other. He looked about the bus and even smiled at the chief, who did not smile back. He listened to the chatter around him as one might a fairy tale, both hopeful and afraid of the awesome possibilities. He was surprised that a bus company could insure its passengers against injury, accident, or cost of burial, whereas the politicians who promised the people better health care never delivered. It was as if this bus and its company existed in a dream world. Since the motor park he had run to was already south of Comfy, in his mind Jabril had begun to associate all the new things he had experienced so far with the myth of the South. In his imagination, he saw the South as more developed than the North, even if it was inhabited by infidels. He saw well-paved roads and functional hospitals. He saw huge markets and big motor parks full of luxurious buses. He thought about big schools with colorful buildings and well-fed children. He believed this was precisely the sort of place to escape to. He needed a place to hide and to heal, and from the little he had heard from these Christians, he did not think he had made a mistake by running south.